Hey everybody, this is the April 2017 Florida MUFON live stream. Tonight we have a special guest, Debbie Ziegelmeyer. She's a board of director for MUFON. She's also one of the heads of the MUFON Dive Team. She's a Star Team member, and she's the state director of Missouri. And she's going to be talking about a subject matter that we're used to here in Florida, which is the subject of UFOs in the water, or USOs, however you wish to define it. You know, where we have these unidentified flying objects or moving objects, whatever, that are interacting with the water. So she's going to be going over some cases and some of the experiences that she's probably had with her research. As far as news in Florida, we've been pretty busy. John, our chief investigator, has been staying real busy with cases. We've been getting hit a little bit hard here and there every now and then with a bunch at one time, but we will be presenting some of those cases in the near future. We are getting some pretty interesting cases, so look for that coming up next month. But let's just go ahead and get started, and I want Debbie to go ahead and tell us everything about who you are and what you do here in MUFON and what you're going to be talking about tonight.
Oh, wow.
Pretty
well went over it. I've been interested in UFOs, and I really would rather call them UFOs rather than USOs, probably for the last 20 years or better. I've been a scuba dive instructor since 2007, but I took up diving the weekend after 9/11, which was really bad timing because the government pulled all of our files. I guess they thought we were all going to take up diving so we could bomb dams or something. I don't really know, but they confiscated my file. But which made me interested anyway in what's underwater. And since we got 1 out of 5 UFO sightings are water related, and a little bit over 70% of the earth is water, it's a very good place to hide things. Another thing I found out from research is less than 5% of our oceans have actually been explored. So there's a whole lot down there that we don't know about. I'm going to be talking about this in probably greater detail about bases underwater and the history of what we have underwater, but I'll be talking about that at the MUFON Symposium in July. But tonight I'm just going to be talking a little bit about some of the more interesting water sightings that we've had and kind of a history leading up to it, when a lot of this first started.
And just a quick question, do you think that the the USO or UFO phenomenon interacting with water, is that a common aspect about some of the cases that we receive?
Well, like I said, one in 5 is some type of water related. I guess that's not really hard to explain since 70% of the earth is water. But then and it's an average. You're not going to get 1 in 5 UFO sightings. That's not mine, is it? Uh-oh. No. Okay, you're not going to get 1 in 5 UFO sightings related to water in some place maybe like Arizona. You'll get a higher percentage in some place like Minnesota, which 1,000 lakes. But just for average, it seems like they're around a lake, they're around a river. Right now we have UFOs that are seen triangle craft hovering over the river not too far from here, right over the Mississippi River at one of the bridges. And we're getting a lot of reports on that. We've even got some pictures, that the people actually took of this craft kind of moving by. I think it ended up in the MUFON journal. So yeah, for whatever reason, and which I'll get into more detail later on, we have a lot of UFO sightings, USO sightings.
So I'm going to go ahead and pull up your presentation here, and feel free to hey, anytime you want me to switch a slide or if you need me to move ahead, just let me know. I'm here to help out. So yeah, let's hear about what you've come across in your study.
With the PowerPoint or?
Yeah, with your presentation. Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. We can go to the next slide. Is it going to be full screen or? Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah,
there it is. Yeah.
That's just some pictures that I found online. Just the UFO, water related, which they're very easy to find. You can go to the next slide. So a lot of people think that Christopher Columbus was the first one that had a documented sighting, but actually 1067, and this year people saw a fire that flamed and burned fiercely in the sky, and it came near the earth, and for a little time brilliantly lit it up, and then afterwards it revolved, ascended on high, and then descended into the sea. Then also 1361, there was a flying object described as being shaped like a drum, about 20 feet in diameter, emerged from inland off of the sea. It was near western Japan, and that's documented in 1969 in Jacques Vallée's book. You go to the next slide. So that's Christopher Columbus. Most people know about this, but I mean, it's a little bit more detailed than you believe. When it was out on the deck patrolling the deck of the Santa Maria about 10 p.m. on October 11th, 1492, and he thought he saw a light glimmering he said at a great distance. He hurried and summoned the gentleman of the king's bedchamber, I guess his assistant, I guess it would be called now, who also saw the light. He described the light as being a small wax candle that rose and lifted up, which also seemed to be an indication of land. He received the royal reward for this sighting, which I never knew before that he had actually received an award for this. So this was documented in his logbooks. His son Ferdinand also characterized it. He saw it too and characterized it as a candle that went up and down. But after a short time, it vanished and it reappeared and then vanished. And each time it was dancing up and down in sudden passing gleaming lights. And after about 4 hours, it disappeared and they started to see land, and it was never explained again. You can go to the next site. Okay, the Battle of Los Angeles. Okay, well, I know it's the Battle of Los Angeles, but this was hovering over the water in San Pedro Harbor, our Navy base there, 1942. The interesting thing about it is if you can see all the armor, all the rounds of ammo that are being shot at this thing, and the spotlights. Now, if it was just a plain spotlight, it would have been going right through. You know, they would have been crisscrossing, but they're obviously stopped at something. So there was something that was there. This was a sudden appearance of an enormous round object. It set off immediate wartime blackout. Air raid wardens calling for immediate blackout and for additional military. This incident resulted in the death of 5 people. A couple of them had heart attacks, and the rest was from shell fragments that were raining down on the homes and the buildings for miles around. The command in San Francisco confirmed this statement. He said that the aircraft which caused the blackout in Los Angeles for several hours had not been identified. Thousands of citizens who heard and saw the activity were spread across several counties. The anti-aircraft barrage came after the 14th Interceptor Command ordered the blackout. They had just thousands of rounds that were shot at this. They never did. I guess I can go to the next slide. Okay, that's several articles that were written in the newspaper about it. Next slide. And there were a couple eyewitnesses reports. There was a woman, air raid warden, who said that it was huge, that it was practically over her house. She'd never seen anything like it. She said it was just hovering there, hardly moving at all, and she said kind of a pale orange. And they had reports that when it did move, it moved very slowly. But most of what you heard in the newspapers and you know, kind of reports about it, I always thought it was stationary, but it was actually moving. It moved down the coast toward Malibu. There was also another eyewitness that said that they sent fighter planes up. And they watched them in groups approach this thing. They were shooting at it. Didn't seem to matter. It seemed like the 4th of July. They'd never seen the sky lit up so much. And he said it was just marvelous. It was really something to be seen. Came right down to it from Long Beach. The official Long Beach military, the official report was that it was a weather balloon. So our military was unable to take down a weather balloon. You can go to the next next slide. Okay, the Maury Island incident. That one's, but actually it's a pretty interesting incident. That one, Harold Dahl reported that on June 21st that he was on a patrol boat with 2 men, his son and their dog. And he said it was around 2 in the afternoon. His boat approached the east shore of Maury Island. he looked in the sky and he saw 6 objects that were floating about 2,000 feet above the ship. The objects were made of some reflective metal, donut-shaped, and about 100 feet in diameter. And he had a fishing ship. The center holes were about 25 feet in diameter. Dal said he also saw round portholes in what he thought was an observation window. So 5 of the craft were hovering around one of the craft. And he said that then the one, it just stopped and hovered while the other one were moving around it. Dal beached his boat because he was afraid that the center craft was going to crash onto him. And once he got onto shore, he took several pictures with his camera. Well, the lower ship stayed in position for about 5 minutes. And then all of a sudden, the 2 of the ships seemed like, these crafts seemed like they touched together. And after they came in contact, he said he heard this loud thud. And then suddenly thousands of pieces of what he thought looked like paper were dropping from the inside of the center ship. Most of the debris landed in the bay, and he said some of it on the beach. And he started picking it up, and he found out that it was actually lightweight metal. And along with the metal, there was something that was dropping into the water, and he said about 20 tons of a dark metal that was like lava rock. And he said when it hit the water, it was steaming. So as this stuff is coming down, they took cover for several minutes. This ended up landing on their boat anyway. The debris hit his son and caused his, burned his son's arm, and a piece hit his dog. So after this rain of metal, the craft rose into the air, headed west out to sea. Dal went to his boat and tried to radio for help, but the radio naturally didn't work. So they sailed back to the dock, and they dropped the poor dog overboard. They kind of buried him at sea because he was dead. He took his son on to the hospital for treatment, and then he called his boss, Fred Chisholm, and told him what happened. So Fred went over there, and they took some more pictures. The negatives had spots on them, what they thought were probably had to do with damage from maybe radiation or some kind of an exposure. Let's see, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so the investigation went on. Dal and Chisholm sent a package of this debris to publisher Ray Palmer in Chicago. The package contained a box of the metal fragments and statements about what had happened on the 21st and 22nd of July. And a few weeks later, Kenneth Arnold, from the original, the UFO in Washington sighting, Kenneth Arnold had become a UFO investigator. So he arrived in Tacoma in late July with an airline pilot, E.J. Smith. And the 2 of them met with Dal and Chisholm. They examined Dal's boat and conducted an investigation. And on the afternoon of July 31st, Captain Lee Davidson and First Lieutenant Frank Brown of the U.S. Army Air Force flew to Tacoma from Hamilton Field in California. In addition to being the pilots, the 2 men were also part of military intelligence. So there were a lot of people interested in what had gone on. They met with everybody, and they said, well, there might actually be something to all of this. So you can go to the, well, actually here, yeah, you can go to the next slide. The investigation, okay, yeah, that would be good. Right there is fine. So the investigation went on with these officers. They gathered up some of the material, and they were getting on a plane, and they were going to take it back with them to the base. Next slide. Whoop, yep, go to the next one. Unfortunately, they didn't make it. The plane ended up coming down. So what happened was that Dal and Chisholm said that the Air Force officers took some of the strange metal with them. The people thought that they heard, in the area, thought they heard anti-aircraft guns shoot the plane down. The local newspaper and the FBI received phone calls stating that the plane was shot down to cover up the information Brown and Davidson had found. And because of the loss of life, the Air Force launched a big investigation trying to find out exactly what happened, and the FBI launched an investigation of their own. They determined that the crash had been a terrible accident. One of the engines had caught fire. The men began bailing out. Before Brown and Davidson could jump out, the wing broke off, struck the tail section, which also broke off, and the plane went down into spin, trapping the men. So you can go to the next slide. This is a picture of the 2 gentlemen there who died. So there ended up being a big cover-up. In the meantime, Dal and Chisholm were both approached by the FBI, and they were told that they'd better be quiet, or there were going to be consequences, that they would threaten them, and they'd also threaten their families. So they decided to keep quiet. And I believe it was probably a couple slides back in think it was well, later on, Kenneth Arnold. It was in a Fate magazine, 1950. Kenneth Arnold wrote an article about this, and then the men came out and said, yeah, you know, it really did happen, but at this point it's a little controversial. Oh, you can go on to the next slide. Oh, yeah, there. This is a copy of the report that the Air Force made concerning the accident. It just basically, it's kind of hard to see there, but it's just comes down to that it was an accident. Next slide. And this is the cover-up. They were said they were warned that the government would prosecute the 2 men for fraud because 2 people had died. And then, like I said, a few years later, in January of 1950, from Fate magazine, Chrism stated that the incident happened. And Kenneth Arnold included in his Maury Island book in 1952, The Coming of the Saucers. Next slide. Okay, Shag Harbor. Shag Harbor is a really famous sighting. Shag Harbor is up the East Coast, up north, and you can see there from the map where Shag Harbor is. It's above and to the east of Boston. On the night of October 1st, 1967, at about 11:20 p.m. Atlantic time, it was reported that something had crashed into the waters off the Gulf of Mexico near Shag Harbor, and at least 11 people saw a low-flying lit object head toward the harbor. Multiple witnesses reported hearing a whistling sound like a bomb, and then a whoosh, and then a loud bang. Right away, they checked to see if there was any Canadian aircraft that had gone down, and this case was eventually filed as a UFO by the Canadian government. The Canadian military became involved, of course, really quickly, bringing in rescue people. The initial report was made by Laurie Wilkins and 4 of his friends that were driving through Shag Harbor on Highway 3. And they spotted a large object descending into the water off the harbor. To get a better view, they went up on a large hill that was about at 820-foot altitude off the shore of Gulf of Maine. They contacted the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, who dispatched people immediately to the area. The Royal Canadian Navy divers were also sent to search, assuming that it was an aircraft that had crashed. Within about 15 minutes, 10 Royal Canadian Mounted Police officers also arrived on the scene. And they were concerned for the survivors, you know, wondering if there was anybody in the water that they could rescue. But before any attempt was made at a rescue, the object started to sink and then disappeared from view. The Coast Guard cutter 101 and other local boats rushed to the spot of the sighting about 30 minutes later, but by the time they arrived, everything was gone. However, the crewmen could still see there was a yellow foam, and we don't know if anybody ever gathered up any of this foam, but there was a yellow foam that was floating on the top of the water. They knew that something had sunk there, something had caused this foam, but they weren't really sure what it was. They never found any survivors, they never found any bodies, no debris was taken by the fishermen or the Canadian Coast Guard or their divers or anybody, and they finally called the search off at about 3 o'clock in the morning. The next day, the Royal Canadian Coast Guard out of Halifax determined that there was no aircraft missing, and let's see here.
I figured I'd show the counts because that's what you're talking about. The UFO.
Yeah, because I'm not really sure which slide here. You can go on to the next one. Okay. And of course, it came out in the newspapers as a copy of the newspaper article there. They labeled this as an official UFO report. The head of the air desk then sent another priority telefax to the Royal Canadian Navy headquarters concerning the report and recommended that an underwater search be mounted. The Royal Canadian Navy in turn sent another priority telefax, and they had divers in the area. 2 days after the incident, they did observe these divers in the area, but the final report said there was no trace of anything that was ever found. So you can go to the next slide. Let's see. Oh, okay, that's the Royal Canadian Mounted Police's official report. Captain Leo Howard Mercy, who just basically told it, you know, about 9 p.m. on October 4th, 1967, noticed the object with 3 flashing red lights. Radar indicated this object to be 16 miles away. And at the time, he said his boat was 32 miles south of Sambro Light. And the object was 16 miles to the north. At the same time, there were 3 other objects on radar 6 miles from the first object, but they had no lights. And then when the object disappeared about 11 p.m., it went straight up into the air with only 1 red light visible. He said, I'd never seen anything like it. So there was obviously other things going on and other things reported by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Next slide. Okay, so in 1993, Chris Stiles and Doug Ledger did a full investigation on this, did a MUFON investigation on this. And they said the divers, along with other witnesses, said that the object that dove into the water off the harbor had soon left the Shag Harbor area. It traveled underwater about 25 miles to a place called Government Point, which was near a submarine detection center. The object was spotted on sonar there, and Navy vessels were positioned over it. And after a couple days, the military was planning a salvage operation when a second UFO joined the first. So common belief was that at the time that that second craft was there to render assistance to the first one. At this time, the Navy decided to wait and watch, and after about a week of monitoring the 2 UFOs, some of the vessels were called to investigate, and then a Russian submarine which had showed up. So now we've got the Russians there in Canadian waters. At this point, when the Russians showed up, the 2 underwater craft made their own move. They came out of the Gulf of Maine and took off into the sky at a high rate of speed, and that was kind of the end of it. But from some of the investigation that you go further into Chris Stiles and Doug Ledger's book about this, they talk about how the Navy divers under there actually saw some type of alien being that were working on this craft and repairing it, but none of this ever came out. Next slide. Oh, Clearwater Lake. I love this because back when my brother Chuck Zukowski, who's our MUFON Director of Animal Mutilations, he lives in Colorado Springs. He and I, well, and there's 6 of us kids in the family, we used to go to Clearwater Lake and go fishing. And fishing, swimming, this was a place just where everybody still goes over there in the area. It's a good recreational lake. But in 1973, this was part of the 1973 Missouri UFO flap. So March 21st of 1973, Miss Jean Coleman and Miss Kathy Leach were crossing the Clearwater Dam at about 9 p.m. and they saw an object rise up out of the water. They said it was hovering over the lake. And the reason that they were doing this, they said that I talked to Miss Jean Coleman, who still lives in Piedmont, Missouri, which is just a little bit outside of Clearwater Lake. She still lives there and runs a little store. And she said they went to a party, and she said, here, they're just 2 young girls. And she said the party just wasn't what they liked it to be. She said there was some drinking and such going on. So she and Kathy Leach decided that they were going to leave. And as they were going across the dam, they saw this object, and it kind of came, they thought it came up from the water. It was floating over the top. They said there was a red flash in the lake. And she said each time the light flashed red, the object got brighter. And she said we could see it climbing. It looked like the lights were red, white, and yellow, and there was no sound. She said we tried to make out a shape, but every time the lights went out, we couldn't see anything. So she said they watched it for 4 or 5 minutes until it circled out of sight. Also, Ken Johnson, who's the owner of the Piedmont Boat Dock, he confirmed the woman's story, and he said shortly before they saw the UFO leave the water, campers were telling him that there was something bright moving over the lake. So later in March, 2 divers out of Eastside Divers in Granite City, Illinois, went to the lake and decided they were going to try and dive in there and find out what was going on. But unfortunately, it was one of those rainy seasons, and the lake was so clouded up that they really didn't see anything. But still, we have a couple of our employees still have family in the Piedmont area, and they said that when they were kids in the 70s, that things were always coming in and out of that lake. And there's still, I did an investigation maybe 6 months ago, and there were balls of light dancing over that lake. So something is still going on. I don't believe there's any kind of an underwater base, but I believe that for whatever reason, whether it's to hide or whatever it is that the otherworldly people in their craft need, they found what they need in Clearwater Lake because they've been visiting since the 1970s. Next slide. Oh, Lake Huron. Lake Michigan has a lot of sightings. Wow, that top part's really small. Um, there's a lot of sightings that come in and out of Lake Michigan. That would be a place that I would actually consider there might be some type of a base under there. I know there's a lot of anomalies in Lake Michigan, including, I understand, a pyramid. But this one case in particular was a MUFON case. They said they were camping on September 12th at about 9:25 p.m. and they noticed four very bright red-pink lights. The four lights were in a perfect geometric form similar to a cross, and they didn't blink and they didn't lose their form from the time that they saw them until they moved from north to south. She said they flew toward us in a perfect formation, then suddenly the two center lights dimmed and disappeared. And the top and bottom ones went out, she said, at the same time. They thought that the lights at first had been flares, but from the way that the altitude was, that they really didn't think they were planes. So after the red lights went out, they noticed a dark, shadowy object moving east faster than any jet from where the red lights had been. And as it moved, she said it got lower and flew over the lake. It was 3 treetops in size as it descended toward the water, and then they saw flickers of white light directly underneath the object, similar to a reflection of light that was simmering off the moving water. Eventually, it made absolutely no noise, but eventually it vanished into the lake. Okay, next slide. And I could probably go on all day about sightings in and out of Lake Michigan, but we have an equal amount of things that are going on in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is one of the busiest sighting areas for not only UFOs on land, but really a big area for sightings, underwater sightings. Jorge Martins is the lead investigator there, and he's got a whole website of just the things that are coming in and out of the water in Puerto Rico. It's pretty incredible. Next slide. So these are just a few of the pictures. There were a couple pictures of things in and out of the water and a little kind of an area just depicting Puerto Rico. You can go on to the next slide. So I begin to wonder, okay, well, so what is it in Puerto Rico? What's attracting them? Well, you have the Puerto Rico Trench, which lies along the northern coast of the island. It's one of the deepest parts in the Atlantic, 497 miles long and 5.3 miles deep. Next slide. Also, Puerto Rico is part of the Bermuda Triangle. So we've already got some odd things going on there. Next slide. And we have the Arecibo Radio Telescope, which is the largest radio telescope in the world. That's also on Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico also has so many sightings. That was a stop on one of our cruises. My husband and I have taken a lot of cruises in the Caribbean. And Puerto Rico actually has an extraterrestrial highway. The mayor of the local town is trying to, one of the little local towns is trying to build an extraterrestrial airstrip in case anything wants to land. They're going to give them a place to land there, but last I heard he was still trying to come up with some funds. I know. Next slide.
Good luck.
This is Laguna Cartagena. The interesting thing about that is if you look at the lagoon, part of it looks kind of like the United States. It's a small body of water. They're uncertain of the depth. It's polluted from agriculture runoff and illegal sewage. There's some kind of it's also known for large, unusual waterfowl. It has some species of animals and birds that are only indicative. Sorry, it's been a long day. That basically it's the only place you can find them, and I'd say that might have something to do with the illegal sewage drainage and the polluted runoff. But there's some animals there that can only be found in this lake. But for years, people have been seeing balls of light coming in and out of that. I've also read some reports where there's some craft coming in and out, but there's a lot of balls of light that are circling around that lagoon. The Laguna Cartagena would be the western southwestern corner of Puerto Rico. Next slide. Okay, so this is one of the reports. They have their own UFO hunters in Puerto Rico. And one of the reports I thought was interesting was this of a 53-year-old social worker who grew up in Puerto Rico. And since the age of 13, he'd been surfing there. He said he's had several UFO sightings, but on one occasion around 6:30 in the morning, he said, which is basically the best time to surf, several silver color objects came out of the water, and about half a mile from where they were sitting to catch a wave, he happened to see another surfer there, and the two of them watched these objects. He said they were round, they hovered in one position, then they took off straight up into the air at a speed, he said, that was just unbelievable. He said they took off at a fast rate of speed. He said about a half an hour later, he said the objects came back, and he said it was probably 6 or 7 of them, and then they went right into the ocean. He said he never really reported it to anybody, and then he started watching shows on TV and thought, you know what, I saw some of that stuff. So he started to think back about it and finally made the report. He said he thought it happened in January of 1971. Next sighting? I'm sorry, next sighting, next slide. Oh, I love this sighting. This is 1989. In Sencio Cataque, I guess he's a local fisherman. This gentleman's the bravest man I've ever read about. He's a local fisherman and professional skin diver and snorkeler, and he said, I was alone fishing in the deep when around 5:30 p.m. I became aware of an enormous, really shiny thing moving underwater. It stopped 500 feet from me, and then it turned itself off. So naturally, he said he grabbed his flippers, mask, and snorkel and went in for a closer look. He said it was about 25 feet deep, and when I got down there, I realized it was round. It was flat on the top and curved, and also curved on the top. He said I descended even more and got right over it. I touched it, and it felt like its surface was not metallic, but porous, like touching sand or cement, and it had kind of an ashy gray color. And he said, when I touched it, I also noticed that there was something sort of absorbing water, like sucking it from the top, which was full of these little holes. And he could see that there were, little suction areas. So he came up for some more air, and then he went back down again. And this time he said he swam under it for about 3 feet from the sand, kind of at the bottom. And he said he felt it expelling the water back out again. So then suddenly he said it felt hot to the hand, and he said, and it lit up and it started making this nasty squealing sound, and then the water started getting hotter and hotter. So he came back up to the surface, and he said he swam to a little island as fast as he could, and when he turned around, he said he saw this tiny little object come up out of the water and head straight up and vanish. And I thought, wow, this guy just went on down there and sat on a UFO. And there are so many sightings. If you go on the website for Puerto Rico, a lot of these are in Spanish, and fortunately, someone's gone out there and translated these so we can enjoy them. Next slide. Okay, this is just Puerto Rico. This is from the UFO Hunters Puerto Rico, and you can see all the little flying saucers on the island. It's just absolutely covered it up just with the sightings that they've had. I think I did this last year, but there's a lot of sightings. We've even got them on our MUFON website. Next slide. Russian. There are a lot of Russian UFO sightings. I'm just going to talk about one in particular that was really interesting. Next slide. Okay, this one, it was in June of 1984. The Gory was in the Mediterranean, 20 nautical miles from the Strait of Gibraltar, and at 1600, the ship, the gentleman Globa was on duty, the first mate. With him was second in command S. Bolotov. They were standing watch at the left bridge extension wing when both men observed a strange object. When the object was astern, it stopped suddenly. The UFO was gleaming with a grayish metallic shine. The lower portion of the craft had a precise round shape, and its diameter was no more than 20 meters. They also observed waves of like oh, like tubes or something that, you know, kind of like these waves of some kind of an electromagnetic field that were outside of it. The base of the object's body consisted of two semi-discs, and the smaller being on top, and it moved slowly as it revolved in opposite directions. The seaman's attention was also centered on the bottom portion of it, which looked completely even and smooth, and he said it was kind of the color of an egg yolk. At the edge of the UFO's bottom, which was easily visible, was something that looked like a pipe. It glowed with an unnatural bright rosy color like a neon lamp. So they got a pretty good look at this. It seemed that it moved in the same direction as the lower disk, but at a much slower pace. But the interesting thing about this was that suddenly the UFO jumped up several times as if it moved by an invisible wave. Many lights illuminated its bottom portion, and the crew of the Gory tried to attract the object's attention by signaling it with a projector. At that time, the captain was on the deck with the men, and he and the second command were watching the object. And however, the UFO's attention was distracted because there was another ship coming up on the port side. It was an Arab dry cargo ship on its way to Greece. The Arabs confirmed that the object had hovered over their ship too for about a minute and a half, and then the object changed its flight pattern and was gone. So this was seen by two different ships. Next slide. Okay, this was a MUFON sighting report. Oh, in Malibu. I was surfing with another guy, surfing again, at the county line when it came out of the fog bank just off of the shore. This gentleman saw this. Oh, let's see here. He was out there surfing, and this kind of came out of the fog, moved around the water, went in, and came back out again. Okay, next slide. I think I lost my. Oh, okay. Okay, this here, I'm gonna jump ahead here. 1947. Okay, so 1947, we're coming up on the 70th anniversary of Roswell. And while everybody was focused on Roswell, New Mexico, I've done a little bit of research on that, and there were actually UFO sightings across the United States the same time. Kenneth Arnold's was in Washington on June 25th, and it started with that. This was July 7th, 1945. We believe the Roswell sighting was the 4th or the 5th of July. So this is July 1947. Two San Rafael teenagers saw a flattened, glistened object that emerged from the water, fly around, then dive back into the water 400 yards from the shore. Then also on July 8th, 1947, and that was the same day the Roswell Daily Record came out, there was an article on the front page of the Catalina Islander newspaper detailing an alleged sighting by 3 visiting Army veterans that there were six flying discs traveling at a high speed from the northeast and passing directly over Avalon before disappearing over the East Peak. So this is also multi-discs, just like Kenneth Arnold had seen. Next slide. So the sightings continued on after the 1947 incidents. I mean, there were sightings in 51, 54, 55, 57, 62, 64, 70, 80, 90, 91, 93, 2004, and it goes on and on and on. These are just a couple pictures that of unidentified objects that were taken in and around Catalina Island. Also in 1980, a pilot named Noah Felice claimed that a UFO was hovering on the water, and it shot a beam of light at his small plane, caused it to crash, and it also resulted in the death of his cousin. I believe his cousin's name was Mark, and caused several injuries to him, so it took his plane down. Next slide. June 14th, 1992, there were reports of hundreds of UFOs that were observed from the water. Independent witnesses claimed that there were in excess of 200 USOs or UFOs that emerged from the water, hovering momentarily before accelerating off into the sky. And they were all in complete silence. So this is the bay there, that's Avalon. So if you travel from the Newport Beach area, or I believe they also take boats from San Pedro, That's the bay. That's the main little town, Avalon, there on Catalina Island. Next slide. Okay, so let's see, how am I doing for time? What is in the Baltic Sea? Margie Kay, our Missouri MUFON assistant state director, actually contacted these people, and they're trying to get funds to go back out and see what this is. Next slide. Okay, so kind of a brief description of it. This is a diagram that they made, that they have on their website. But this object was found on the Baltic Sea, basically underwater, completely circular, 180 meters in circumference. The object is 200 feet across, mushroom shaped, comprising of a thick pillar that's rising 8 meters out of the seabed. It's a 4-meter thick dome on the top, like a mushroom. It's got cavities like corridors inside the object. Its straight and smooth walls are in certain areas with many right angles. And so, I mean, this isn't just like a rock. There's steps, there's formation. There's visible formations on the top of the object, which are set at a 90-degree angle and look like passageways, walls, stairs. Also, there's stone circle-like, which look like fireplaces. They're hard black, almost petrified, burnt-looking stone. Each is a few inches in diameter, like 4 or 5 pearls in a necklace in various arrangements on the top of the dome. It's 25 centimeter. There's a 25 centimeter hole on the top of the object, and it's not yet known what that leads to, if it leads anywhere, and a long runway or skid marks leading to the object. So next slide. This is the March 2014 Ocean X team discovered the right angle walls and the absolute smooth surfaces and the cavities inside the object, as well as something resembling a staircase. So this is their original sonar image, and then, you know, some more images off, basically their original sonar images of what they saw. Next. Okay, so there's the sonar images of the seabed showing the object at a depth of 100 feet or 100 meters in the Sea of Bothnia and the northern Baltic Sea. So you can see there where they've kind of, in the blue picture, they've kind of outlined where it looked like something hit and skidded and then it came to a stop. And then there's another sonar image of it in gray. Next slide. Okay, so this is a direct quote. "We went out and saw the walls, which were straight and smooth. It was frightening, as if in a science fiction film." Dennis Asberg from the Ocean Explorer, co-founder. And I think that's a rendition there. Next slide. Oh, okay, so as far as books on USOs or UFOs, there are so many of them out there, and I found even more than that, but these are all really good books. You can see there's a book on Russian case files. Timothy Good has a lot of information in one of his books there on earthly disclosure. UFOs in Water, that's a fantastic book. I found a lot of information in that. Several books on the subject, and when I started researching for the MUFON Symposium, because at the MUFON Symposium I'm going to be doing a presentation on basically the possibility or making a case for the existence of underwater alien bases. One of them I would think would be, of course, off Catalina Island. Another one, of course, off, that be in the Pacific Ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean, in the neighborhood of Puerto Rico, Guantanamo Bay, that type of thing. There's a lot of sightings that are going on there too, but there's Mediterranean Ocean. There's a lot of reasons why you can make a case for there being underwater alien bases. As far as like lakes, little lakes and streams, I'm going to try and I'll get into that probably at the MUFON Symposium on why, whether or not it's just they're hiding, or if it's in fact the hydrogen that they're maybe using to replenish their ships is the reason why they're coming in and out of the smaller areas. But as much activity that's going on in some of these deep areas, and they don't necessarily have to be in a trench. Our submarines don't go, past, I believe, crush depth is somewhere less than 3,000 feet. So we don't go really deep in the water. It doesn't take a whole lot of, you don't have to be really deep to try and hide something if you're an otherworldly craft, especially as easy as they come in and out of the atmosphere too. If you notice the craft, the sightings, you hear these sightings of things that come into the atmosphere and then go right into the water. It's not like our shuttle where you may have a problem where, if the shuttle or the old Apollo capsules come in at the wrong angle, you've got a problem with heat shields and that type of thing. These craft are just coming in and out of our atmosphere with these. They go right into the water. And if we had a craft that, and have had planes that have hit the water, they break up. They don't go in with these. Not even a ship goes in with these, some of the ships that have sunk. So these craft obviously have some kind of electromagnetic field around them that make them go in and out of our atmosphere and water with these. Next slide. I'm not sure what that is. Oh, okay. So basically what it comes down to is modern day technology revealing deep water secrets. I'd say probably yes. So if there's any, that's pictures of me. I ran an underwater UFO USO class back a while back, a few years ago, and that's some of our research pictures.
Nice.
Are there any questions about anything?
Yeah, we actually do. I think one of them actually kind of related to, and I was trying to find the name here who asked the question, so I apologize. But the question was, are there any, technological approaches, underwater? What's your experience, or what are your thoughts for probably new ventures into studying the underwater phenomenon and technologically? Like, how would you go about that? I think that was sort of the gist of the question.
Well, the problem that we have is recreational divers are limited to 130 feet. A lot of what's coming in the water is a lot deeper than that. As far as the research, that's all technology, whether or not we can get a hold of mini subs. We do have people going underwater, and we have labs underwater. I know we have bases underwater, but we also have research labs underwater. There's one that's not too far from Key Largo. It's about 60 feet that I accidentally ran upon. We were just going out treasure hunting, and we came across this sign, and there it was, this lab. But as far as trying to investigate things underwater, that's all a matter of money. We do have in Missouri our Columbia, Missouri, our section director there, Chuck Frieden, is a mini sub operator. So
there you go. Yeah.
If we need somebody, he is licensed. So we have the knowledge, the capabilities. I've got enough equipment for 12 divers, all various sizes, to where I could fully equip 12 divers. But the problem is that we don't get any calls when something comes in out of the water. By the time I have any knowledge of it, it's months later. We need to get people that are more active in reporting to MUFON about possible places where there is something hidden underwater, and whether or not it's diveable for us. But as far as all the sightings, we're getting everything that's really deep. Humans have a big problem with pressure.
Yeah, no, certainly. Dinah, you've been tracking probably most of the questions. Do you want to go ahead and, it looks like there's a few coming in as we speak, so go ahead and hit up on some of the questions that we've been.
Debbie, one of the listeners would like to know, what was the size? You mentioned there at Avalon, they saw about 200 objects. Did any of the reports give a size?
I think it was various sizes. Obviously I can go back here in my paperwork and see, but I don't think anyone it's really hard to determine size too. It kind of depends on where you are. We had that problem in Missouri when we had our 2011 UFO flap. We had people that were talking about the craft that was being seen being anywhere from Oh, the size of an 18-wheeler to the size of a football field, the size of 2 football fields. So trying to, off the distance too, it's really hard to determine. I don't think anywhere in here, in my research, it actually told how big any of the craft were. I would say that they weren't the size of football fields.
Yeah, and I know with the one USO case that I worked on during with the Agua Dia case, I mean, the size of the object was considered to be, based on estimates, only about a 4-foot diameter at max. So not a very big object. And in some cases, that's true. Some of them are very small. So.
Yeah, it depends.
Another question we had was, when you were at Clearwater Lake, were there any water tests performed during or after the events to see if the water changed?
No, not after the event. The divers didn't really get wind of this. They didn't go out there, and it was a couple months later. They sent divers from Illinois. They did take water samples. They took soil samples. They didn't find anything out of the ordinary, but the problem was too that this was during the rainy season, so there was a lot of rain from the time of the sighting on. There is a spillway there, so a lot of the water ran off the spillway. The spillway's where the last sighting was, the opposite end of the lake, the one that I investigated about 6 months ago. The water, it's really hard. I'm going to be talking about that during the field investigator classes at the MUFON Symposium, and some of the ways to take samples, evidence samples, and how a lot of that dissipates really quick. I mean, look what happened in Shag Harbor with the yellow substance. It was there for a few hours and then it was gone. So a lot of that being the massive amount of water, you lose your evidence pretty quick.
Now, on land, we know we have ground penetrating radar. Is there anything available, such as something that similar for deep water exploration?
I believe Chase is it? I have trouble pronouncing her last name, but Chase, you know who I mean, Chase.
Kluski.
Kluski, thank you. I couldn't get it out. It was it's stuck in my throat. Chase did an investigation with a group for a TV show on the object that was seen underwater off of Malibu, that was seen on Google Earth. And they were able to get some underwater sonar equipment for that. I'm hoping that she's going to write up an article for the MUFON Journal and let us know what they found. But according to Jan Harzan, they were able to identify that it wasn't any kind of an underwater base. So yeah, it is available. It's all at a high cost. I mean, if you think renting a car is expensive, why don't you try and rent something that goes underwater and takes sonar pictures? What we're hoping for is someday that we'll have somebody that's got a ship like that, or is really interested and can give us the equipment to use fairly cheap, or you have to wait around for a TV show and somebody with interest, and then you can gear them into the direction, that you want.
When you were talking about the Baltic, about the object, did you mention that they're working on bringing it up to be examined, or can you further detail that?
From what Margie Kay had told me when she talked to these gentlemen, I believe it was probably spring of last year. I was probably right around this time last year. She said that they had the place pinpointed. They were trying to get funds to go back because all these are hundreds of thousands of dollars to rent these ships to go out and do their explorations. They were in the process of raising funds. They want to go back. They want to do some deep dives. As far as bringing it up, I think it's pretty deep. I don't know if they've thought that far. They want to get there first and get a better look at it.
Yeah, I know that they had received. They sent a submersible, a little one, down there to take a look at it. It is kind of a strange looking rock formation. They weren't sure what it is. I mean, they don't know if it was rock because obviously they didn't test it. But yeah, it was definitely dome. It looked kind of like a big mushroom, like you were describing. In fact, I can probably share my screen and show people their footage. But they still don't know, I think, what exactly it is, and I think that's what they're looking for funding to go back to the location, and obviously they're wary about sharing it, but the location, because then everybody in there,
Yeah. Then then the site is salted. You never know what people are going to do. I thought it was interesting on the sonar how it looked like something had hit and then skidded.
Yeah, it's obviously not connected to the seabed, so
Right.
they just suspect that it's something. But as they were coming down over, and here's some of the video from it, it's definitely something under some debris and some of the rocks. But then they get up near the edge, and this is some of their footage from. I think it was when they first went, or not when they first got it, but when they came back for the first time with a small, submersible. They got some images of this dome, mushroom-shaped like rock, or what they think is a rock. They weren't sure what it is, and so it's there's a lot of things in our oceans that we who knows, it's preserved, and everything gets preserved so well down there. So it's like you never know what we'll find. Go ahead, Diana.
Debbie, there was another question, and I'm just going to read it directly how it was written. This person would like to hear more about your underwater exploration, and I think you may have mentioned that someone had confiscated some of your files, and if they did do that, how did they identify themselves, and what was their reason for intervening?
Oh, okay. Well, I became a scuba diver in it was the weekend after 9/11. And what happened was that all the dive shops in the United States were paid a visit by the FBI, and they took all of that shop's files. Just grabbed the files and took them. The shop, the scuba shop that I was certified out of, it took them months to finally get back their files. That's why the one reason why PADI, which is a professional association of dive instructor, why they made why they put on they made it easy to go online and be able to look up a diver, because if you go diving and you forget your scuba, your certification card, and you're out of the country, you used to be able to have something faxed by the dive shop, except the FBI had all the files. So then they were able to access all of that now through the main office. So that's what that was. The FBI was worried that there were scuba divers that had taken the certification just so they could go underwater and maybe blow up bridges or dams or something. So they were. I knew right that all the divers from maybe 2 years before, maybe 2-3 years after, and I don't know how far now to present, have files with the FBI so they can keep track of who's going underwater and how often. As far as research underwater, I've only done a couple underwater cases and didn't really find anything. They suspected it was something underwater. We didn't see it. I know mostly in the Midwest, what I teach is my son-in-law and I teach firefighters scuba diving. We teach them through open water, which is beginning through to rescue diving. And the main idea of the rescue diving is that the water is limited visibility. When I took my certification, I was holding the instructor's hand and I could see as far as his elbow. So a lot of what the firefighters are doing is it's recovery of vehicles and, possibly an occupant in the vehicle, but it's by hands only. So it's really, really hard to see something underwater that has fallen in to the water, especially, in the Midwest, where you don't have that clear Caribbean water or the ocean water. However, that's why that's what I'll be addressing at the field investigator course in July. Some of the techniques to where we can find stuff even though we have limited visibility. It is possible. There's something down there, especially something large and metal. Yeah, we'll be able to go right to it. There's techniques for that. It's not going to scare us off.
Of course, there's also the drone technology that's being now adapted to water too. So that might be something useful in the future.
Oh, wouldn't that be great? Yeah. But still, you still got limited visibility.
Yeah. I'm talking more like, data gathering, sonar returns,
Sure.
gamma ray pulse systems, things like that.
Well, if you have some large metal object in the water and it shouldn't be there, you go as a diver, you go in there with your equipment. You've got your dive compass. It's going to point false north.
Right.
That over and over again. So it's really easy to find a large object if someone says, oh, there's a UFO crashed under here someplace. The problem is the only couple places that I've heard that, one of them was the Mississippi River.
Right.
No way I would go into the Mississippi River and look for anything.
Yeah, I know. I've heard the stories from the divers, like cadaver divers.
Yeah.
It's scary with the catfish they're probably bigger than you.
Oh, the catfish are huge. The currents are terrible. There's debris under there you can get caught on. When my son-in-law's water rescue for the city of St. Louis, firefighter for the city of St. Louis. So my daughter's also a firefighter in St. Louis area. But that's the problem they have. They go down anywhere they go down with ropes.
Right.
And safety.
What do you recently a producer, who was working actually with one of the astronauts, Cooper, who originally was mapping underwater heavy metal materials, and I guess they have a show out now with all this guy's research that he inherited from him. What do you think of that? Like, have you heard about this and some of the stuff that he took down while he was in space? He was actually looking for, he was meant to be looking for, nuclear weapons and things like that in the Caribbean, but he ended up finding what he thinks were a bunch of shipwrecks and treasure possibly. But, he was getting a lot of these returns from the equipment that he was using in all kinds of places. And I didn't know if you've heard about that.
Yeah, I did see one of those episodes. I thought, wow, that's fantastic. He went looking for one thing and found something else. I mean, that's how the Titanic was found.
Right, satellite systems. And I know it was some sort of, I can't remember the exact tech that they were using, but it's old tech. And it was essentially just doing a return. And I guess they would get these tick marks from its sensor that would tell them that there was probably something under the surface or near the ground that's, containing a lot of metals or something like that. So
it's a matter of the ship, the size of the ship and the equipment, but then, the fuel, and then back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And wow, I know that how much fuel our 28-foot pontoon boat uses. I can't even imagine what a large ship plus the crew and the equipment and the time. And yeah, that's the problem with that. If they could come up with something a little bit smaller. I do have a camera that goes underwater. It's got a 150-foot cord that I could take out on a rowboat if I wanted and maneuver it around. It's got a little 5-inch LED screen.
And I think now they even have DIY, build it yourself submersibles that are like, $300 or $800, and they can go pretty deep. So I guess tech is just kind of catching up, and starting to become more accessible.
Oh, absolutely. That's my next toy for Christmas, birthday. I'm lucky my husband supports me. When all the holidays, I get new equipment. So he gets things like Bass Pro gift cards, and I get like a lift on my Jeep so I can go cross country a little bit better, or I get night vision binoculars or metal.
Exactly. I wanted to get your opinion on that most recent USO case, if you want to call it that again, the Aguadilla, Puerto Rico. We talked a lot about Puerto Rico and a lot of the cases being reported there. I remember meeting Martin. He actually came to the symposium this past year up here in Florida, so he's been really keeping track of all the really interesting cases down there. And I've got the video, and you can just kind of give your opinion. I don't know. I haven't heard from you on this one yet, but I don't know. See if I can pull it up here. Yeah, there it is. So this is the video, and the reason why I turned into, I guess, like you said, you and I had a discussion prior to this presentation about labeling things USO when it's really a UFO or whatever going into the water. So in this case, it kind of shows the strange object that was zoomed in by the coast, not the Coast Guard, but I guess it was the Border Patrol.
Yeah, Customs.
Yeah, U.S. Customs, Border Patrol, and with a thermal imager. And I don't know if people at home can see it very well through the live stream, but you'll see the object coming in and out of the water a little bit here, going in, hitting the waves, but not making any disturbance of the surface of the water. And then it comes out, and it splits into two objects. You can see it disturb the water a little bit when it split, and then they disappear. So I didn't know if you ever got to see that.
Yeah, well, the last symposium, Rich Hoffman did a fantastic presentation on this, and then he also did a Skype presentation for my group here in Missouri. So I've seen this several times. Yeah, that's unbelievable. Well, they first noticed it was going around the airport, and then it went into the water. And the interesting thing was that it did split.
Yeah, it was neat. I actually got to talk to one of the officers in conjunction with the actual witnesses. So the guy who works with him, they were kind of fidgety about actually talking to anybody. So they used their proxy, one of their fellow officers, to talk, and they are still dumbfounded on what it was. They don't know what it was. They didn't get any answers, I think, from when they asked. According to the witness that I interviewed, they didn't get any help from anybody. In fact, they actually encouraged them to contact the civilian agency, which was, I think, Bigelow Aerospace's phone number that was on the FAA's website. So they just basically, and that's what we suspect, but we don't know. It was an 800 number, and but that was at the time. That's what was up on the FAA's website, and he said that they did submit it to Quantico and Air Force Intelligence to try to get some sort of answer, and they that's when they recommended the phone number, and just kind of a non-answer. So it's really still a mystery. We still don't know exactly what it is. There's still some argument back and forth on where the object is and where people saw it. There's everything from balloon to pelican, but the witnesses saw the light, come towards the airport. They actually made it visual contact with it, both the pilot and the tower, and before the light turned off. And I think, have you ever heard about this, like the reddish pinkish light? I mean, you mentioned that in some of the things that you talked about. Yeah.
That's what they saw at the beginning, was a reddish pinkish light.
Yeah. And that's what these guys said. And I know that there's other cases around that island, including, this is really interesting, including a Project Blue Book case dealing with this exact location, this area, with these reddish lights coming in and out of water. And so they actually, the way the report is that the Navy was actually used to blockade to see if it was Russians, spying on, on their base, but then, they couldn't figure out what they were. And so they actually blockaded the shoreline, evidently, according to some of the report in the Blue Book report about these lights. So it's been a long time phenomenon for sure. But have you come across cases like this where people are, oops, sorry, let me get this audio off here, that have reported similar sightings of small objects and lights coming in and out of the water, especially in the Caribbean?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of MUFON sightings, depending on where. I mean, MUFON from cruise ships. There's some interesting things that they never did figure out what they were. A lot of California sightings. Sightings across the world. There's a lot of stuff coming in and out of the Mediterranean Sea. There's things coming out of the Baltic Sea. There's also, I think it's Baikal, I believe, a sea and not too far from Russia. That was in one of the Russian reports where they had divers that were actually underwater that interacted with alien beings. There is so much about the water. Well, in and out of the water, Clearwater Lake for one. I mean, the one right here, 40 miles, well, I guess it'd be probably 90 miles, I guess, from my house. Yeah, there's stuff that comes in and out of the water there all the time. Balls of light over the top of the lake. Since the late 60s, craft seen coming in and out. It was kind of a joke at the kids, when we were kids. Oh, we're going to go to Clearwater Lake. Maybe we'll get to see something. I was in Farmington. Well, it was not Farmington exactly. French Village, August 20th, and had a UFO sighting just looking at the lake. Of course, it wasn't coming in and out of the lake, but I happened to be looking at the lake at night and had some objects that just kind of came into view and then split off all on their own. And my daughter and my son-in-law were sitting there with me. So it was the strangest thing. It was these 4 points. We were looking at the planets, and I was showing them the constellations. And then I had my my Star 3 map on my iPad, and I'm pointing out everything. And the sky was gorgeous, and it was just past dusk, and so we had a really beautiful sky. The boats are going across the lake, and then these 4 pinpoint lights just appeared from nowhere and kept getting brighter and brighter and brighter right in the middle of our field of view. My son-in-law said, "What is that?" And I said, "I don't know." I mean, and they got brighter and brighter, and then they got to a certain point in our atmosphere, and they split in 4 different directions, one of them zigzagging right across in front of us at high altitude. The things are out there. I always joke about how I either need to get a dog or start smoking, because it seems like a good portion of our reports are people that are saying, well, I was outside having a smoke, or I was outside walking the dog. Yeah. I happened to be outside just watching the lights at night over the lake because it was a gorgeous evening and had a UFO sighting.
Yeah, I think it's like things like that just tell people, like, hey, try to get outside. It's
right.
Make it a routine, and
didn't have a camera. I was just enjoying myself. Whether I don't know whether that would have picked up on a camera or not, but my son-in-law, it's a firefighter. He just starts screaming, "What is that?" And I said, "I don't know." I did file a MUFON report on it, but I don't know what that was.
Hey, Dinah, you got any more questions? She was there. You're in mute mode right now.
Yeah, I'm unmute. No, there was one question earlier, and they asked, what was the most common shape of UFOs?
Oh, gosh.
For USOs.
USOs, yes.
I think it's kind of a cross, or USOs.
Yeah.
I'd go with circular, because you don't hear a whole lot about the most common shape, I think, are triangle shaped craft, but that's not really what's coming in and out of the water. Most of the pictures that I found, most of the reports are something that's kind of in a circular or an oval shape.
Yeah, definitely. And that's, like even with the cases that you presented, most of them were disc, ovals, smaller, compact objects.
Right.
And that's what I've noticed too with the cases that I've actually worked on, dealing with USOs. I think there was one triangle case that I worked on up in Newport Richey, Florida, where they thought, first they thought it was a flock of birds near the water, but it was really what they ended up describing, both witnesses, which is a triangle from the side with the water pouring off of it, and it was transparent. So they just saw this haze, and then it was a brown haze, and then they looked at it through these aviation binoculars, and that they showed me on site. And I was like, yeah, they're pretty powerful, and they were able to get a really good close look at the details. And they said it was the strangest thing. It was like looking through glass with water on it. And they suspected that it came out of the bay water, which has in that area has like a tingy brown color because of the tannins in the water from the mangroves, and that's what he suspected that he was looking at, was this thing was lifting out of the water as they caught eye of it. He said if he didn't look up, he would have never noticed it. It's that quick. So, but yeah, most of them, I think I agree with you. They've been kind of compact, small, round, and disc-like shape. So, Dinah, any other questions for our speaker?
Nope. I think I've covered them all, unless I missed something.
All right. Well, again, if you guys have questions, now's a good time to ask them. We always let people get involved with our casts here, with our live streams, and even if you have questions generally. I know that there was a question that came in, and I don't know. I think John, did you get my text message about it? You can come on off mute if you want. Our chief investigator John is here. Hey John, you're still muted, buddy. So you gotta unmute yourself.
There we go.
There you are.
Remind me what it was.
Well, I texted you. It's okay. It's no big deal. There was a question from somebody in our audience here asking about if we've received any cases in Northwest Florida, USO related or over the water anyway, near the Air Force Base, Eglin Air Force Base. And I actually was going to see if you could look that up, but that's okay. It's no big deal. I know we have received quite a few cases, and I'll leave you to it real quick, John, if you can look that up real quick. We have received quite a bit of cases, and Debbie, I don't know if you're familiar with Eglin Air Force Base up in the Panhandle of Florida, probably near Gulf Breeze kind of area.
I've heard of it.
Yeah. So this was kind of like the area where a lot of people suspect the reason for some of the activity out there during the Gulf Breeze incidences. Because Eglin is such a huge facility, they say, well, there's got to be some connection there, either with the phenomenon reacting with the base or something being associated with what's going on there. Of course, a lot of the sightings were literally on the property of the Air Force. So, you can drive through it and not even know that you're on the property. It's just literally a town within itself, city. It has everything in it. It has, it's surrounded by roads and forests. And, you're literally driving into its own town. And anyway, we're obviously, and this kind of brings me into the next thing that I was going to mention, which is, this year coming up in November is going to be the 30th anniversary of the Gulf Breeze incident. I got that right? 30.
You sure did. 30 years.
I think I said 40 years last
A big
time.
celebration, a big conference there.
Yeah. Well, we're going to probably hold a kind of a conference. We're trying to get a hold of some of the original investigators, Watson, and maybe even some of the people that worked on the cases and some of the analysis of the images. But right now we're going through the large assortment of cases that MUFON received back in that time period to kind of get a better assessment of the overall case, other than just from the most popular sighting, from the most popular witness, which was the media was eating up at the time. And there's so many cases not related to that one individual that it just makes the case for something that was really happening. And of course, you can sift through and people seeing lights in the sky or misidentifications, but there are some up close and personal sightings where you have people like, city officials, you have a reverend from a local church. You had a lot of these different types of witnesses that just, scaled all different types of walks of life. And it was just neat to read through some of these. And the drawings were almost identical in some cases, which is just so neat. People seeing these things come in and out of the water. Even our own state director, Bland Pugh, witnessed an object kind of, over the water, and where he would say that it would get really bright, like brick red, and then it would get really white, like a hot white color, and then it would go back down to that brick red color, and they would see something fall from it over the water, some of it coming out of the water, or off in the distance. And so there was a lot of different things that were going on up there. And John, whenever you want, you can interrupt us if you find something.
Well, when I was archiving some of the old cases, what I tried to do was I didn't focus on the 1 year. I was categorizing in with the famous cases, 86, 87, 88, 89. If it made reference, maybe sometimes even 90, because of the 1 year, that wasn't, that was kind of a UFO flap in itself. It was the same kind of craft, and people kept referring back, well, that's what was seen at Gulf Breeze. And I saw this craft, and I remembered seeing that, report on that, and I thought, oh my gosh, I've seen the same thing. Well, a year later. There were even some of them that may have been a year before. So just because, the sighting was 1 year, we have to be real careful that, we judge everything by our time, not by alien time, I guess. But everything that we associate it with human time, human values, human limitations. And we have to be really careful about that. So even though something might have been 87, it might have been the same day, even if it was 88. We don't know if these people are time.
There's all these hypotheses. Yeah, time travelers, interdimensional, multiverse.
Oh, absolutely. And you have to kind of bundle all that, and I always say that UFO investigating is a piece of a puzzle. It's a giant puzzle. And every single piece that we find that's really good evidence is one more piece to that puzzle, and pretty soon we're going to get the big, large picture. But we can't discount anything.
So yeah, no, exactly. It's going to take a lot of work, as you know, Debbie. Just like an investigator, it's just trudging through the mud as heavy as it is sometimes. But there's a lot there to look at. There's a lot to go over and review, and I've just like you're state director, and you see just the plethora of what you have to do and work through, and then you start to see, this is the thing, is people, some people don't make it, after a while, they it's a lot of work. And so people kind of get tired of it. But then, there's some of us who stick around because we see that pattern. We see some things that are just so interesting that just open up new questions, right? Is that the same for you? I mean, that's how it was for me anyway. So.
Well, just when you think you've seen everything, then there's something else.
Yeah, exactly.
Last year we had a Mothman sighting, and we have Bigfoot sightings here all the time now. I mean, Missouri is the home of Momo, which was named by John Schuessler. We'll have craft sightings, and for like 2 months, everywhere across the state of Missouri, they're triangle-shaped craft. And then all of a sudden, there's these strange balls of light. And a lot of those, well, for a while, last year, we had something that was donut-shaped in the sky. And some of these donut-shaped objects, whatever they were seeing anywhere between 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 5 o'clock in the afternoon by several witnesses, several miles apart. The same day, never moved, just something stationary sitting there, white donuts sitting in a crystal clear sky. And then we had other cases a little bit later on where they were seen at night, videotaped at night, but it was the same object and it was kind of pink in the sky. So we don't know what that is, but that's something brand new now. There's some kind of donut shaped something that's appearing over the Missouri skies.
Right.
I mean, it's always something new. It's not like you get tired of investigating because you've heard it before.
Right.
Every case is a new adventure.
No, exactly. It really is. Well,
Morgan.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I was able to find 12 cases that have been reported to MUFON near Eglin Air Force Base, that area. Only one, they questioned if it was a USO. Okay. And the case was closed as information only.
Okay.
So there's no definitive answer to that one. And a check on the internet showed a few UFO cases in the area over the years, but
what was the description of that one? Do you know? What was the general description of that one when you read it? Was it
the one USO?
Yeah.
Let me see if they even gave that right there. No, they included a photo with it, but the photo, well, actually, this is kind of odd now that I'm looking at it. It's of the water. It's an overhead view of the water. It was taken, it's on Google Earth, and you see a boat to one side, the shores to the other side, and something is moving very fast through the water and leaving one heck of a wake, but there doesn't seem to be anything there. Of course, it could be a submarine, a small submersible. I don't know.
Yeah, we do receive cases time to time. I know, everybody asks, is the Panhandle a hotspot? We really, it's hit or miss. I mean, it depends on the year. I mean, it can be, I guess. Florida's surrounded by water, so we have a lot of viewing space, so we get a lot of our cases concentrated on the shoreline. So it's definitely one of those things that we have to keep an eye on. But yeah, it's to answer the original question about any recent cases, no. A lot of most of the recent cases we get are kind of vague and unrelated. But yeah, we're definitely still watching that area, obviously, because of Gulf Breeze, the past, a lot of the activity that happened then. I think we had the most recent Bubba sighting is basically what they called that craft that everybody saw around Gulf Breeze, which was actually viewed by multiple employees of a restaurant, including patrons. Was up there, Panama City, Florida, which is kind of up there, but not quite all the way. But and they described it exactly like the old, round top-shaped type UFO. So coming out of the water and then eventually over top of the restaurant. But no one was, of course, willing to talk to us from the restaurant. And the one employee who did said that they're mad that person reported it, and they said the boss was like not very happy about that. So
Morgan,
anyway, it goes. Yes, sir.
Morgan, that one USO sighting there, the witness described it as invisible.
Okay. So there was like something that they couldn't see.
But he stated that the wake was huge. He said it would have had to been like an aircraft carrier making this wake behind it. And yeah, you can see that in the picture.
Yeah. Interesting. You
I
never know.
don't know if a submarine would displace water like that.
Not unless it was right
Not
under
without being up on the surface.
No,
Right.
that's interesting. And we know a whale wouldn't. Mammal. So, yeah, that is interesting.
Yeah, John, thanks for pulling that
Sure.
up.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dinah, any other questions that we need to address before we shut it out today?
No, I've gotten all of Debbie's questions to her, so that's good.
Okay.
Thank you, Debbie.
Oh, no problem.
All right. Well, thanks, Debbie, for coming on. I really appreciate you coming on and talking about this. I know everybody is looking forward to seeing your presentation at this year's symposium in Las Vegas. If you guys haven't checked it out, it's mufonsymposium.com. You can get all your ticket information there. It's this July. What's the date? It's July. Debbie, you probably know it better than I do.
It's the 21st to the 23rd.
21st to the 23rd, yeah.
I always get mixed up because I have to be there early because of the board. So I mean, I've got to be back on Thursday.
Yeah,
Wednesday night.
Yeah. So that's happening. And Las Vegas, we at the JW Marriott. It's a huge place. Beautiful area, though. It'll be a lot of fun. I think, like you, Debbie, we end up hanging out in the hallways more than anything. But there's a lot of interesting speakers and things like that. So if you guys are interested, go there and check her out. She has a whole bio there, and hopefully get to see her speak.
It's going to be another trip to Area 51 too. For all those going to the symposium, I did the one that we were in Vegas the last time. Well worth the money. It was phenomenal. It was one of the bucket list things.
Exactly, and I think Dinah, you went on that as well, right?
I sure did. It was wonderful.
Good.
Well, they're doing it again.
Great. Yeah, I haven't done that. Maybe that's what I'll do. I don't know.
Oh, you need to.
Although, yeah, I got to figure out when the state directors meeting is. I know I'm supposed to be at that, but yeah, I haven't done the touristy UFO thing yet ever.
It was great.
Yeah. Anyway, okay. Well, that ends our presentation and meeting tonight. We will definitely be opening up for some more question and answers coming up next month. We will probably be talking about military UFOs. We have a lot of lists of military cases here in Florida, and so we're really hoping that everybody can come back next month. We will definitely make the announcement on our meetup site. We also do it on social media. If you get a chance, go to meetup.com/Florida-MUFON. And you can go and RSVP for all of our stuff there. We always put up any event that we're doing in Florida there. All of our meetings from different section directors are there. So please join up there and follow us. It's free, and you'll get those announcements. Also follow us on our Facebook and Twitter. So it's real easy. Just type in the name Florida MUFON and you'll find us. And we also make the same announcements there. And also check our website out always. We're updating articles, adding things. I know we had some questions about a sighting that happened back in October 2016 or 15 rather, of the rocket launch, and there's a good article that Carl Paulson has written in there about noctilucent clouds created by these rocket launches that we have here in Florida. So check that out. It's a great educational piece, and you get the kind of an idea of what people are seeing sometimes during these launches. So until next time, everybody, I really appreciate everybody coming. Debbie, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Debbie and John, thanks for contributing and helping out with the chat and everything. And, maybe we'll get back into some more open roundtables coming up with these online. We haven't done that yet with these live streams. And maybe we'll take on some more questions next month. And we're going to be talking about military UFOs. So anyway, until next time, guys, thanks for coming by, and good night.
Good luck.